Transformers Exodus, Chapter 7. Investigators would later determine, from a detailed analysis of disruptions on the grid, that the string of synchronized explosions that ripped through 6 lasers, Uriah, Polyhex, Stanix, Blaster City, and several sites in the Sonic Canyons, took place less than a cycle apart.
It is clear that these attacks were carried out at the behest of the criminal gang leader, an underground gladiator who calls himself Megatron,
stated High Counselor 𝕬𝕤𝕤𝕤 as the rest of the High Council looked on. 𝕬𝕤𝕤𝕤 was the longest-serving member of the council. His district included Blaster City and the entirety of the Badlands. For more orbital cycles than any Cybertronian cared to remember, he had agitated to annex the Hydrex Plateau and its lucrative spaceport to his district. For this reason, few Cybertronians tended to believe anything he said, on the grounds that anything he said concealed an agenda that would eventually lead to an attempt at that annexation. In Blaster City, an armaments factory filled a steel canyon, its exhaust portals and smokestacks coming just level with the surface. Once, raw materials were mined out of that canyon. Then, when they were exhausted, the factory was built in the space they left behind. When the bomb went off, attached to a reservoir containing plasma fuel for the arc torches used in the construction of highly heat-tolerant weapon barrels and magazines, observatories on moon bases 1 and 2 recorded a flash that momentarily whited out their lenses directed at that portion of Cybertron. From the ground, it looked as if a column of energy had erupted from the canyon, reaching toward the sky and spreading into a torus of expanding heat and light. Bits of debris as small as the casing of a conduit junction and as large as the entire cooling stack, which had until that moment stood radiating away the heat from a small fusion reactor, rained down across multi-hicks of Badlands and the unfortunate Cybertronians who happened to be working, scheming, or just passing through. In Blaster City, sparks were cheap. No one cared about life or death, and no one knew how many Cybertronians disappeared when the armaments factory vaporized. The people who watched did know one thing, though. Cybertron's council militias had just lost an important source of munitions. When Megatron heard of the attacks, Orion Pax was speaking to him on a secure grid link. Orion Pax had tested it himself, using the security apparatus available to him in the Hall of Records. And then, Megatron had put Soundwave to work, adding another layer of security.
"If you ever need something hidden, or need something to disappear," Megatron said, "Soundwave is the bot you should talk to."
"I'll keep it in mind," Orion Pax was saying. And that was when the reports of the bombs started to flood the grid.
"By the Allspark," he swore. "What is this?"
On the video link, he watched as Megatron registered the events. Then he turned back to face the link.
"Orion Pax," he said, "it is time for me to speak out. Cybertron must know that this is not how our movement will operate, and they need to know it now. You are an Iacon, correct?"
Orion Pax nodded.
"I need an open channel, one that cannot be interrupted. I need it to feed to all of the cast aggregators and directly to the Council's group input. Can you do this?"
Even as Megatron spoke, Orion Pax was constructing the necessary parameters. Legally, this task belonged to one of the programming casts, not his own data cast, but Orion Pax was coming to full realization of just what his actions already meant for his existence within the cast system. "It's done," he said, and opened the link for Megatron. Then Orion Pax watched, as for the first time, Megatron stepped out of the shadows and into the public consciousness of Cybertron.
I had nothing to do with these attacks, but I do not deny the possibility that the Cybertronians who carried them out were partly inspired by my belief that every Cybertronian has the right to self-determination.
Megatron swept a powerful arm in an arc over the assembled crowd, taking in a cross-section of castes and occupations.
I pity the loss of life. But how many of those who died took pleasure from watching me fight for my life in the gladiatorial pits below Kaon? How many other Cybertronians died for their pleasure? Now those Cybertronians, whose lives were your pleasure, are telling you that they reclaim their lives. No Cybertronian shall tell any other Cybertronian what can and cannot be done.
Megatron was in control of a much larger network than Orion Pax had understood. This was a situation he had not expected. Had Megatron choreographed the entire thing because Orion Pax was in Kaon, on Megatron's home territory, to witness it from the inside?
I am Megatron. I lead all those who choose to follow me, and I repudiate all those who perform despicable acts in my name. I do not fight with bombs, but with logic. I do not believe in killing, but in the arena of ideas. Let the perpetrators of these attacks feel the full weight of Cybertronian justice.
Megatron stepped closer to the feed, his visage filling the frame as his expression grew cold and menacing.
If I find them first, my justice will be swifter and more final.
The Sonic Canyons were said, by some of the more pious and conservative Cybertronians, to be the ears of Primus, his means of keeping track of events in the universe his creations inhabited. The great multiversal computer, Vector Sigma, was popularly said to be installed in those canyons as well, although it had been long orbital cycles since any Cybertronian had directly interacted with Vector Sigma. Most of them did not know for certain that Vector Sigma was still active or functional, or had ever existed. A series of explosions tore through the far northwest terminus of the canyons, where legend had it an ancient entrance to Vector Sigma's interface had once existed. No one, initially, could be certain whether it was an attempt to collapse the venerable computer or a forced entry into the interior of the canyon walls. In other words, was someone trying to destroy Vector Sigma or access it? Or what else might be inside the Sonic Canyons that only a bomb might reveal? In the chaotic aftermath of the explosions, all possibilities were on the table. Even those who knew for a fact that Vector Sigma was housed in the subsurface expanse built below Iacon listened to the conspiracy theories with interest. Across the grid, the upper classes twittered in outraged tones. Was nothing sacred? What did these scum desire that they would strike at the very foundations of what made Cybertron Cybertron? This Megatron, they said. He was behind it, no doubt about that. We've heard enough about him to know. The Council should do something. This Megatron, he should be in prison. Next, it'll be the resorts he destroys, or the museums, or the Hall of Records. Or perhaps we would all be better off if he were dead. Orion Pax could stand it no longer. He hacked into the media feed using a priority code from the Hall of Records. "This is Orion Pax," he said. "I am a data miner at the Hall of Records in Iacon, working under Alpha Trion himself, and I am here to testify that Megatron is not responsible for what is happening." The data channels around him exploded with feedback. In that instant, Orion Pax seized his former existence as a simple data clerk and was reconstituted as an outlaw, terrorist, revolutionary crackpot. What he heard and saw over the feedback channels, before he instructed the grid to isolate and focus on the council-moderated lines of communication, shocked him. The moment he spoke in support of Megatron, he might as well have been Megatron. In the public view of Cybertron, Orion Pax and Megatron were now the co-leaders of the movement that was setting off lethal explosions all over the planet. "No," he said. "I have known Megatron. He did not do this. Neither did I. All of you must listen. You must understand." In the back of his mind, he could hear Megatron saying,
"They will never understand, because they do not care to understand. As long as their situation is better than ours, understanding is the last thing they want."
Orion Pax hoped this would not turn out to be true. Around him, Soundwave and Shockwave and Megatron's other lieutenants watched. An observer might have noted that they looked less than thrilled to have an outsider taking such an active role. Orion Pax, in fact, noted this as well. Was there a way to handle it? To change it? He thought that the best thing he could do was prove himself capable. He did not care to be liked by Megatron's lackeys. He cared to be respected. He cared for the good opinion only of those who deserved his good opinion, and those who believed in what was right.